All right. Thanks for being patient with us. And want to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're at in the world. Welcome to the 2020 International E-Conference on Interreligious Dialogue. My name is Dr. Darren Slade, and I am the president of the Global Center for Religious Research, which is hosting this year's academic conference. Now, one of the great things about GCRR is that you can attend these academic conferences right from the comfort and safety of your own home without having to worry about hotel fees and travel costs, none of that. In fact, you're being joined by students and scholars and specialists from all over the world right now. And because each of these presentations are video recorded, the information presented here will be available all across the globe for millions of people to see. Now, for those attending live, as you listen to each presentation, feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions, and our speaker will do their best to answer them at the end of the presentation. And with that said, I'd like to introduce to you my very good friend and our next presenter, Dr. Valerio Marconi. And allow me to share my screen to give him a proper introduction. Now, Dr. Marconi is going to present something called today, The True Ring Cannot Be Worn, a Panikkarian way out of the logic of the three rings. Now, Dr. Marconi has a PhD in humanities as an adjunct professor of philosophical hermeneutics at the University of Urbino. His research deals with the dialogical and relational nature of sign and meaning, and he's also recently published an English translation with commentary of Eckhart's Utrum in Dios idiom es Intelliger, which I think Dr. Marconi will be able to pronounce that a lot better than I can. But he's also published multiple articles on mysticism and semiotics as well. Now, I want to highlight two things. Dr. Marconi has two forthcoming books. One is called Between Philosophy, Semiotics, and Structuralism, and the second one is called Philosophy of the One, a semiotic reading of Plotinus, Dionysius, and Eckhart. Now, both of these will be published in Italian, and they're both coming out later this year. I think one is even coming out in the next month or so. Dr. Marconi can even detail that a little bit more. But with that said, I'll turn it over to my good friend, Dr. Marconi. You have the floor, sir.
So, good morning, everybody. I start with my presentation. Okay. So, my way of getting out of the logic of the rings presupposes a little explanation of how this logic works. And this can be done starting from an Italian tale writer, who's Giovanni Boccaccio. He's pretty famous for his Decameron. And in this book, he gives us a story, which is not the first one to tell us, but it's an interesting story about the three monotheistic faiths. And I'll give you just short passages from the story, which is kind of longer, and then up to show you how this logic of the three rings works. And of course, it's all about a true ring, which should be or can't be recognized. And so let's start reading these passages. Saladin sent for Melchizedek, and after having received him in an amicable manner, had the Jew sit down beside him. "You're a worthy man," said Saladin, "and many people have told me about your great wisdom and your deep knowledge of the ways of God. Consequently, I will gladly learn from you which of the three laws, the Jewish, the Saracen, so the Muslim one, or the Christian, you think to be the true one." So the question is pretty clear. And the answer is told by a parable, a story about a father who has three sons and who wants to give them three identical rings. Of course, one is the true one, and the other two are copies. And the father of the story, which is, of course, it's a metaphor of God, the father can barely tell which one of the true ring which one is the true ring. The father in this case disappears, and after their father's death, they all claim the inheritance and the title, while denying the claims of their brothers. And each one produced this ring as a proof that he was right. But when they found the rings were so similar to one another that they could not tell, the father could barely say which one, but they cannot. Which the true one was. The question of which son was their father's real heir was left pending, and so it is still to this day. Of course, this is the same question as which of the three monotheistic faiths is true in this context. And the end of the story is very interesting because Melchizedek willingly gave Saladin every last bit of the money he asked for, because he needed money for his wars and things like this, which Saladin later paid back in full. What is more, Saladin bestowed the most lavish gifts on Melchizedek, became his lifelong friends, and kept him at his side in a lofty position of honor. So here we have an interreligious dialogue, of course, which is a tricky one, because, of course, it was a very difficult situation for Melchizedek to speak with Saladin. But at the end, the form of the dialogue helps to get to friendship. Yet the point is that the question is still pending, and there is a true religion, despite this impossibility to know which one. And so, of course, the logic of the three rings has its center in the problem of truth. Which religion is the true one? In modern times, Lessing, an important thinker of the European Enlightenment, rewrote this story by Boccaccio, and he gave it two ends, because the story is told during a more general plot, and the one to tell the story to the Saladin now is called Nathan, who's the main character of Nathan the Wise. And this tale, the Boccaccio's tale, is at the end, is at the middle of the story, and the difference is that in the case of Lessing's version of the story, one cannot say which one is the true ring, yet the way in which the story is told gives the idea that good behavior is a sign of the possible truth of our religion. And so the truth claim should turn into a moral and humanitarian engagement. So to show that one has the true ring, it's to show that one is committed the most to human values, in a way, of course, in a good sense, not just in a secular sense. And the very relevant point is that the most relevant point is that the father in the tale told by Nathan to Saladin has not the possibility to recognize which ring is the true one. So this image of the father is not anymore godlike, but it's just a metaphor to speak about tradition. All the tradition, all the monotheism cannot show their own truth, cannot discern the truth, and so they just have to enter in this kind of moral competition. The play by Lessing ends with a vision of embrace, because all the characters somehow find out to be relatives, because the tale is told inside a play, a theater play, basically. And at the end, as in many works of theater, as in many dramas, there is a final recognition of some relatives get to know that they are actually relatives. And this is, of course, a metaphor of the human family, which should be united beyond the different ways of practicing religion. And the basis of unity is that the limits of human knowledge cannot be such that we can speak of truth in the religious domain. Then the result is that the very fact that, to use the metaphor, there must be a true ring, but no one knows which one is the true one, is turned to explain that basically there is a rational religion which is found in this moral engagement towards human friendship. And the outcome is that we're speaking of a religion beyond the different traditions, because it's a way of living religion in an open manner. And the outcome is, in fact, a religion within the limits of human knowledge, because each religion can only enter in this kind of moral competition. It's not anymore a matter of showing the truth, even if there is still this assumption that there is an unknowable truth. And to this point, the risk is to keep religion as a moral engagement and to give up the source of divine knowledge, which is revelation. And what I find most relevant is that the possibility of going out the problem of truth, it's connected to this impossibility to overcome the problem of truth in the interreligious dialogue as represented by this story, is bound to the idea that that the father cannot tell which ring is the true one. This is a big difference with Boccaccio, and it's even a stronger difference to an older version of this story. Of course, Lessing writes in German, and the other story, the one which is closer to Boccaccio and which is also different and already shows a way to get out of this logic of the three rings, is found in the Novellino. Novellino is a collection of short stories, which is a little more ancient than Boccaccio's one. And this time the story is pretty short, so I can read it, tell you it completely in its complete form. And it's very relevant to see what is different from what we have seen so far. The Sultan was in need of money, and so he was advised to proceed against a rich Jew who lived in his country and to take away his property, which was abundant beyond measure. The Sultan sent for this Jew and asked him what was the best fate, thinking, if he says the Jewish fate, I will say that he sins against mine. If he says the Saracen fate, I shall say, why then do you adhere to the Jewish faith? The Jew, upon hearing the Sultan's question, replied as follows: my lord, there once was a father who had 3 sons. As you can see, they move from 2 to 3 sons. And so here comes the logic of the 3 rings, but in a new fashion, in a new way. That is the one I want to try to think in philosophical terms. So he had 3 sons, and he owned a ring with a precious stone, the finest in the world. Each of the sons begged the father that upon dying he would give him the ring. Seeing that everyone desired it, the father went to a skillful jeweler and said to him, make me 2 identical rings to this one, and set each other with a similar stone. The jeweler prepared rings that were so identical that no one except the father, so you can see the stress of the father is the only who can tell the truth, could recognize the genuine one. The father summoned his sons one by one and gave each a ring in secret. So here's the element of revelation. Each one thinking he had the true, the genuine ring, and no one but their father knew the truth. So here in the story, the father is the only one who knows the truth and who reveals it in secret. And so I say it is with the fates, which are free. And so he moves from 2 to 3. The father on high, and now he's moving from the godlike image of the father to the real father, to God. The father on high knows which is best, and the son, that is we, each believes that he holds the true one. When upon hearing this, the Sultan did not know what he could accuse the Jew of, and let him go. Here you don't find the element of friendship, which is fundamental in Lessing, and which is something that I'd like to keep. But apart from the relevance of friendship, there is goodness, because the point is which religion is the best. The matter of truth is just a pure opinion of people, because of course human beings have the opinion to have the true one, but of course the true ring cannot be worn. No one can possess the ring. The only one who possesses the truth is the Father on high. So this is a strong element, because truth is not human matter. Truth is just an object of human belief, of human opinion. Beyond opinions, the only truth is in God's mind, and that's it. But what is common to, so only God has the truth. No man has the truth. But both share in this text the association with best, the best religion. So in this we can get something which is somehow in Lessing, but here it's much clearer. We should overcome as I said it, from truth to goodness. We should overcome the problem of truth. So the question is not which religion is the true one, because this is an exclusive way. Only one can be true. While the best one means that many or all religions can be good, and that there is a best one among them. But we don't know which one. And each one, and everyone thinks that his own one is the best, but is not sure about it. So this logic of the good, it's something which is higher than the logic of truth. And this very point, I think, is, of course, scholarly debate is not stressing much attention on this Novellino version of the Tale of the Three Rings. But something is happening in contemporary debate on philosophy of religious dialogue that goes in a direction which is very similar to the meaning that is conveyed by the Novellino version of the story. And now I show you the main points. So the main focus in the religious dialogue should be the one on good rather than true. And this opens up the question of the you and the face, because there are some ways of doing philosophy of interreligious dialogue that are focused on personal encounter. And exactly the point is that personal encounter should be prior to the question of truth. This means that interfaith dialogue should be with someone rather than on something. So here we can see that we move from possessing the truth, sharing a possession of truth, or speaking about what is true, what is the true religion. And we are moving from this, we are moving from what we believe to the interfaith dialogue in terms of personal encounter, of meeting someone. So dialogue is not on someone, on something, but is with someone. This new approach challenges the idea that interreligious dialogue or interfaith dialogue is a cognitive process. The first element is that it is a religious process, and even before its religious nature, it is a ethical engagement. When you meet a person, you are meeting that person, and this goes even beyond human rights, because it's not just a matter of acknowledging the humanity of the other. It's to say you to the other with the whole of your person, the whole of your being, and also to meet the face of the other, stay in front of the face of the other, without trying to introduce conceptual elements as a primary way of dealing with the other. It's a face from face, a face to face. And now it's very relevant because we can say that in front of the naked face of the other, nowadays more than before, we know that we have the duty, or some know that they have the duty, to wear a face mask. And in our very concrete situation, the way of expressing respect towards the face of the other, towards a naked face without protection, is to wear our face mask. I mean, to not to spread the virus, the coronavirus. And I think it's a nice metaphor to see the asymmetry that comes from meeting a face. Because when you meet a face, you know that you should protect the other. Then, of course, you might ask the other to cover his face and so he's not spreading the virus. But you should be the first one to, when you see that someone is not wearing a face mask, and we are, of course, in a space that forces us to do that because maybe we are too close. And it's our duty to be the first to wear our face mask. And this is, of course, just a concrete example, but this shows how the relation to the other can be asymmetrical. And people who would try to shape interreligious dialogue in these terms, of course, they refer back to Levinas, and they those views on dialogue are inspired by Levinas, must answer that the relationship with the other cannot be symmetrical and mutual. But if we want to keep the relevance of friendship suggested by Boccaccio and Lessing, we should rather prefer Buber's idea of dialogue, where the I and you come together and are mutual. And this is also another possible reference in the contemporary scholarship on philosophy of dialogue. In our world, despite the possibility of speaking about friendship beyond traditions and cultures, and so this I and you relationship, this personal and interpersonal relationship, of course, in our world, there are inequalities that are such that symmetry and mutuality cannot be the standard condition of dialogue. And we must be responsible in advance for the other. And here we see that we need the Levinasian part. Because, of course, not all the participants to interfaith dialogues have the same opportunities. Not all come from rich countries. Not all have political or military might. And so there's a kind of higher amount of responsibilities on those who are richer, more cultured, and mightier. Because, of course, they are capable of doing more. So the others are weak compared to them. The others are weak compared to them, but the weakness of the other, in Levinasian terms, is also the sign of the other's majesty, because the other is the one who can be killed, who's naked in front of me, but also is the other who has written on his forehead you shall not kill. Of course, I'm relying on Levinasian very way of saying it, but the point is that Wolf's mightier has also this surplus of responsibility towards the others. But now you can see that trying to give a priority to the ethical aspect of interfaith dialogue is also a very difficult way of trying to leave aside the question of truth and trying to be good to each other. And the point on goodness is very difficult. Trying to speak of goodness without considering or not giving priority to the question of truth is in a way faced with the problem of which kind of relation we can have with the others. Should it be symmetrical and mutual, or should it be more like Levinas is suggesting us? Because, of course, there is also the problem of responsibilities. The two sides are never, according to people who start from a Levinasian standpoint, are never on the same level. There is always the element of responsibility. And this asymmetry is somehow seen as contradictory to the symmetrical way in which people starting from Buber's view of dialogue are. There is a contradiction with this, basically, because should it be symmetrical or asymmetrical? So this is, of course, an ethical problem, but here we are not focusing only on ethics, but we want to find a solution to this problem, and also an alternative path to the logic of the three rings. And this logic, as I said, is centered on truth. And a possible way to combine and to overcome this contradiction between symmetry and asymmetry, mutuality and responsibility, is found in this short paper by Panikkar. And the title of the paper is Human Dialogue and Religious Interdependence. Interdependence is exactly what we are looking for, because it's both independence and mutual dependence. This way, which is an Advaita way, a non-dual way of thinking dependence and independence, is a way to combine symmetry and mutuality. We can say, or I shall argue, that Panikkar was an inclusivist, at least at first in his book Religion and Religions, who developed a pluralistic mindset. Pluralism is not absolute truth, but it is the way we should think when involved in an interreligious dialogue. And interdependence is both the mutual dependence and responsibility. Panikkar's stress on political and military might of a certain group of people is made exactly in this paper, in Human Dialogue and Religious Interdependence, I mean. And at the same time, he tries to show that it is true that there is a difference in force, in power, and in responsibility, but also that this difference is, however, to be understood in a situation of mutual relationship. So the idea is that we are, of course, there are differences, but also there are constitutive relations in the nature of human beings. And this balance between these two elements, between independence and dependence, and their conjunction is the truth, or at least it's the good way to look at things. This point comes from what Panikkar calls cosmotheandric vision. The idea is that the divine, the human, and the universe are all free and separate from another, yet they depend on one another, on each other. And this way of seeing the whole or the ultimate reality, of course, can be seen as a kind of ontological basis for interreligious dialogue. But more than this, I think that the interdependence is part of the pluralistic mindset, and it's a way of living the interreligious dialogue in terms of our reflection of in the microcosmos, so in the world and in the network of human relation, of the relations that are typical of the macrocosmos of the whole and ultimate reality, which is a world which is co-created and co-produced between the human element, the divine element, and the cosmical or universal element. I am up to finish my time for presenting. I'll show my main references in what I'm telling you right now. And of course, we can have this reading of Panikkar in terms of mindset. So interdependence as something to tell us about a way to think about political and social relations, but it's also a way to reflect in our theoretical activity what we think when we address in a religious way another person. And this addressing of the other in a religious way is to be understood as an image, as a reflection of the cosmical event, of the ultimate reality, which is already experienceable in the relationship with the other. And the very characteristic of this experience and vision of reality rather than truth, it's more, let's say that in this case, I think that Panikkar prefers the word reality. And this experience of reality is a cosmic or cosmotheandric experience. And this is both in a way what's at the beginning of the dialogue in a very implicit way, and then it's what is in the long run there to be shown in a religious, or as Panikkar said, in an intra-religious dialogue with the other. Of course, we can question this point, because on one end, if we want to turn the question of interreligious dialogue from truth to goodness, the best way is exactly to speak in terms of interdependence. But speaking in terms of interdependence, so finding a synthesis of responsibility and mutuality, is also problematic, because we are in a way entering into Panikkar's mindset and into Panikkar's view of reality. And it is a view of reality that we might not agree with. So of course, nothing is for free. And so if we want to solve the problem of which should be the right relationship with the other in interreligious dialogue, we have then to engage a claim, which is a strong claim as Panikkar's, but it's not the only way. It's a possible way, and I think it's relevant when we want to turn from truth to goodness. But of course, there might be many problems in doing so. And I'm eager to read what you think on this and to answer your question and also to discuss with you. So I stop my sharing because I'm here to speak with you.
Dr. Marconi, thank you so much for this. It's such an interesting metaphor, and I think it impacts so many different areas. The metaphor really can extend to not just religion, but politics and other areas of our lives. That's what's fascinating and significant about it. Would you mind going back? You had discussed Levinas's discussion on we need to be responsible for each other, and I can't think of the term that he actually used. Will you elaborate on that? What exactly does he mean when he says that we need to first be responsible for each other before we can engage in this dialogue?
Okay, so basically the word he uses for the face and for the other is visage, which is, you know, the French word. And it means face, more or less. But the point is that the face of the other is a speaking face, in the sense that when we meet someone else, we meet both his or her weakness, and also the very fact that it's someone in particular was in front of us. And this goes beyond our knowledge. It's a kind of experience we have. I mean, some people might be very sympathetic with animals, feel responsible toward animals. But what Levinas is stressing is that usually when we are in front of another person, we somehow, before noticing what the person is saying, we are implicitly noticing and experiencing that he's saying something. And the very act of saying, rather than what is said, it's relevant that we have in front of us a speaking face. And this comes before the everything else. So basically, realizing that the other is a person, the other is someone, is a strong responsibilization. And so the idea is that whoever we have in front of us makes us responsible.
Interesting. Would it be fair to summarize that as saying we are responsible for empathizing with the other person then? That's what that means, is our responsibility is to recognize that that's a human being and that we should first empathize with their position and what their life and where they're coming from. And that is that a correct summarization, you think?
The point is that you shouldn't use the term human being, because when if you let's say subsume or use the concept, he is a human being like me, it's actually a kind of capturing the other into your conceptual scheme. Because when you say he's a human being like me, you are in any way projecting your idea of human being on the other.
Oh, interesting.
While you should let the other speak and see how human he feels and in which way he feels human. So it's more like it's more like that there is something in my experience that is speaking to me.
Interesting.
And that something is human, but it's not human in a conceptual way. It's human in a way of how I deal with that face.
So this then leads to the question that I've presented to a number of presenters to this conference, which is, what do we do? Because this is all well and good when it's somebody who wants to engage in a dialogue and when it's somebody who's willing to share. But what do we do when the person that's in front of us, the other, is somebody who's violent or belligerent or is trying to, control other people's beliefs. Does he leave any room? Does he talk about how to engage in those types of scenarios?
Um, yeah, I'm not totally sure about it, but I think that this is the weak point of Levinas' perspective, in the sense that this duty, it's even a kind of messianic duty to be responsible, has been used by von Balthasar, Catholic theologian, to criticize Buber.
Mm.
Because, of course, Buber is presupposing this kind of ironic way of having dialogue, while von Balthasar says, okay, but the Christian responsibility is an infinite one, without quoting explicitly Levinas, but for instance, Miroslav Volf, another theologian, refers exactly to Levinas and to the infinite duty, let's say, that a Christian has. Because, of course, when the other is violent, the extrema ratio is martyrdom.
Mm.
Or, non-violent ways of acting. Once we move to Panickar's way of dealing it, it's more like, okay, usually the two sides, I mean, West and East, for instance, are not as much power, they are not in a balanced situation. Maybe they were when there was USSR, but now there is nothing like that. And so, since there is this asymmetry, the one who can use the force has more responsibility. That will be the... So basically, of course, it doesn't mean that you should go towards martyrdom. Panikkar doesn't like much to speak about martyrdom, I think. His idea is that we should rethink politics, and of course, who has more might should have much more imagination to find the way to use this might humanly, and to co-create something which is less violent than in the past.
Right. And I think this is I think it's a reasonable critique that we have on a lot of these discussions about interreligious dialogue. We love to present these very, as you call it, these idyllic scenarios, these tactics, right? That if I engage in empathy, I engage in dialogue, that's the first place. Maybe we build a friendship, we build trust, we build rapport, but it's not always possible. And there's not always people who want to actually engage in that. And there doesn't seem to be very much discussion about what do we do when the other is an actual danger and a threat. And I think that to me is equally as important in a religious dialogue. What do we do when somebody is violent? I want to echo what Dr. Giles, who asked this question in the Q&A slot, but he says that he really appreciates how Panikkar seeks dialogue with someone rather than dialogue about something. And I love that. So he asks, how would you encourage that shift? How do you encourage the shift from thinking that we're dialoguing about something to, we're dialoguing with someone?
So at first, I think this can respond both to you and to Dr. Giles. The focus on someone is always particular. So something, even extremism can be something, while someone means the extremist or the radicalized person. And of course, a radicalized person has relatives, has friends, or supposed to, and so on. And for instance, this means trying to, of course, not in a war situation, but if there is a terrorist and the terrorist is caught, trying to a kind of form of education, and also even before, when there are areas in which radicalization is likely to happen, the point is it's start meeting people, make people meet, know them personally, who you are, where are you from, and so on. So it's like really kind of peace building, but inside your borders, inside these. It's like trying to be friends with the others you have inside your territory, you might say.
As a way of preventing the radical.
As a way of preventing, but also one could try to be friends with. They tried in Italy to do that, but there were some legal problems. But they tried to, in a case of radicalization, there was a person convicted of radicalization, and they wanted to build a kind of re-educational path, which is based on collaboration with a Muslim religious authority. So it's like the state and a local religious authority that who should collaborate to re-educate a Muslim extremist. So it's like really, or maybe in this case, it wasn't seen as Christians, but an idea could be that we should try to work together on de-radicalization. So it's like a common action between different faiths, which is not based on who's closer to the truth, but let's try to do something good. Let's know each other, and let's try to include the excluded together.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking of faith, so I want to go to Veronica's question in the dialogue here. She says that if she's understood Levinas well, he considered the face of the other to be sacred. Is that true? And if it's true, does that mean he categorized that in a religious context? Is the face and the sacred, is that a religious category then?
I mean, I think it is. But the point is that I mean, Levinas was also studying Talmudic texts. So I mean, he of course formulates a philosophy that is based upon a certain understanding of the Bible. But at the same time, he has a kind of genealogic meaning of the word God. So basically, the word God, the very word, comes from the face of the other. So it's like phenomenologically, when we speak about others, when we deal about others, when we realize that the other person is a fellow human, but not in the way you were telling me before, not in the conceptual way. It's like, the idea is that we all are relatives, and this refers also to Lessing's point at the end of the Nathan the Wise. The idea is that we are all relatives, we are all brothers. In fact, another element of the faith is brotherhood in a, let's say, in a strong philosophical sense in Levinas. So of course it comes from the words come from the Bible, but there is also a kind of genealogical meaning. So it's like humankind developed a parallel way to behave with the others, which is not a conceptual way, but is a relational way in which we all feel somehow relatives. And so when we see someone else, it's like, oh, it's a fellow human, but it's the proper way in which humans do what maybe animals do when they recognize someone similar to them, which is much more experiential, and it's not like a theoretical framework.
Okay. You're not superimposing your own concepts and perceptions onto the other person. You're allowing them to to be them. Is that
Yeah, yeah.
okay? So what's interesting, before we actually have another question from one of our attendees, before we get to that though, considering his Talmudic background and his studies, and I'm sure you already know this, but Talmudic studies and Hebrew studies, the face of God is a huge thing, especially in Kabbalah and whatnot. Did any of that come into play, this idea of God's face? Do you think any of that influenced Levinus in any of this? What I mean is, in mystical types of traditions, the face of God as not being one you can't behold, you can't see it correctly, right? Did any of that come into play when he's describing the face of the other?
No, I think he is totally against that, because both Buber and Levinas, when they speak about dialogue, they are trying not to get into mystical experience and to avoid. So basically, in a sense, they both stress this point in a Jewish way, not in a Christian way, but the point is that you can love God only through loving other humans, fellow humans. And so the face of God cannot appear, and the human face is a trace of the divine face. So basically, I can only see the face of the others. And through looking at that faces, I can see the face of God. And that's the only way, both in Buber and in the late Buber and in Levinas, because the first Buber likes much mysticism, but the second Buber is more about dialogue rather than mystical experience. And Levinas considers mystical experience as something Neoplatonic, so something which is yet based on somehow possessing the truth, while it's fundamental to remain separated. So the separation between God and the separation from me and the other is fundamental. And as far as I cannot understand the other, it's why the other is divine. The other is a trace of God, because I cannot understand the other as much as I cannot understand and see God.
Well, as much as he might have been trying to avoid mysticism, it does sound a little mystic, though. The idea that there's the divine face that gets filtered into us, and that the only way to see the other is through the face of another person. It does
say mysticism without mystical unity.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's an interesting distinction. Let me turn to this other question here. Oh, Mihak has this. She says, if I understood correctly, for Levinus, dialogue impedes violence, and it should not be pursued unilaterally or vigorously, because this can also lead to violence.
Yeah.
Is that? Can you elaborate on that? Because it seems like a contradiction a little bit. It seems like a paradox.
Okay. So. Okay. Yeah. Yes, because violence in Levinas, it's usually connected to Western thought. Basically, the first form of violence is conceptualization. Because conceptualization, it's also a play of a kind of etymological game. Conceptus is cum capere. It's like taking with, it's grasping, exactly, grasping. When you can grasp someone, both in a violent way, in the sense that you grasp some clothes or things like that, and you can grasp conceptually, but it's like it's always like manipulating. It's the end. And if we think about this, it makes sense, because there is all this tradition. I mean, Giordano Bruno, Seneca, they exaltate man because man has the end, and the man is the most intelligent being because that's the end. And also science almost goes in this direction, with simplifying, of course. And this manipulatory side of man is in itself the root of violence. And Levinas likes to speak about, when you, let's say, pet someone, it's a way of touching the other without grasping. And so this is really trying to see another way of engaging with the other. And so, of course, Levinas is violence is always beyond the corner when you don't see the majesty of the other. On the other hand, the point is that the majesty is mostly present when the other is weak. It's where you can see it. And of course, in saying this, he always quotes the Bible, basically saying this, because you have the one who's the widow, the orphan, and so on. And he has these metaphors, but he's trying to, and he also likes the passage by Matthew when Christ says, what have you done to my little brothers is what you have done to me. And Levinas in an interview refers exactly to this passage, for instance.
Interesting. Okay. It does kind of sound like a real fine line that you have to walk, and there's always this chance of the dialogue breaking down, or because of superimposing perceptions and conceptions on the other, or not recognizing the majesty of the other.
And I think there it's where Sartre can help, because basically Sartre, when he was asked to give moral advice to a student of his own, he said, okay, that student had to choose between leaving his mother to go and fight, or staying with the mother and betraying the state. And basically, the answer by Sartre was, you are free. Oh. You are free to invent the best way to deal with this difficulty, to this moral issue. So it's like sometimes moral creativity is the solution. So we should find a creative way not to be violent to the other. So and here it's of course it's not my field of research, but I know that they are studying about art and interreligious dialogue, and I think that art can be very creative in a way of dealing with the other without being violent in this wide sense, of course.
Interesting. Well, Dr. Marconi, thank you so much for this presentation. It was wonderful, and I learned so much from this. I think the insights that are presented here go beyond just interreligious dialogue. It is across the board for all religious traditions and all persuasions of political persuasions, and just cultural persuasions. I think it even has some implications for language barriers and whatnot. So it's just truly wonderful. I do want to say to our attendees, thank you so much for attending and coming out and supporting us today. We hope you enjoy it. We do have a full day of more presentations, so I hope I see you guys later. Dr. Marconi, I will hand it off to you for the final word.
Okay, so thank you. I'm really glad to have the chance to speak with you, and I think that it should be always, or at least often, like this, like conferences with people from all over the world, and this is possible also thanks to the internet. So internet can be used to do good things.